that that you are, you are really showing your best. So hello everybody. I think you should be able to see me now. You should also be able to see the little palm trees that are behind me, showing that I'm not with you in the UK today. So so let me know that you are here, that we're all good to go. It's going to be quite a short session this evening. Obviously, it's a little bit late where you guys are, and it makes sense to do it fairly short. But if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat, because I always come back to the questions after I do a live, and I make sure that I go over them. So if you've got any questions that come up, please do just drop them down. So let's begin. If we've got 1 month left, what do we need to do? And we've got about a month, a couple of weeks, give or take, depends on when your exam is. But the types of things that we start to think about when we're looking at 1 month left is, as I've said before, if you've watched my previous series of 3 months, 4 months, and 2 months, I think it was, for looking at how to support parents, the first thing that I always like to do is to remind my students how far they have come. And that might be looking at a piece of work that they did very early on, or reminding them how even just a couple of months ago, they might not have understood a concept. And what we're doing, and this is throughout this last little period, especially if you're doing year 5, you're in year 5 right now, and you're reminding and you're building your child's confidence. You're reminding them that they have done new things, and you're saying to them, look, it's a process, it's a journey. What we're not doing is fixating on that pass fail. And as I say at the bottom, there is no fail, because everybody has prepared for the 11 plus. Everyone has worked for the 11 plus, and everyone has seen an improvement in their results, in their grades, in their confidence, in their ability. So you can't fail at that point. And I'm really a big fan of not using the F word with students, because if you say, oh, it's a pass fail type thing, then it shows them that all the work they've put in until this point is not worth it. So I like to focus, especially on this last month, all about the work that they've done, about the ability that they've gained, because we all know the 11 plus process is competitive, right? It's sometimes on the day they just have a moment where a child panics. And what you don't want them to do is to panic and then to come out of the exam and think, that's it, I've just wasted all that time. You'd rather than come out and go, yep, I gave it my best shot, but look at all those things that I've learned. So promote how far they've come. Look back and really remind yourself, because they've made a lot of progress. And the second thing that I think is important is if you are looking at independent or second stage exams, to consider talking to your child about them. So really do make sure that you have spent some time discussing the dates, because often if a student knows they're taking one exam, that one exam just is the only thing that they think about. And then when they've got that exam done, that's it. And then if you say to them, actually, no, you've got a second stage, then it's really hard to get them back up and running. So what I would recommend is, if you are doing independence, even if you have decided really quite late, actually we're going to do this as a backup, or you've realized, right, you've got a first stage and a second stage, do make sure that they are aware of it, so that you can get it in their minds what they've got coming up. Then motivation. At this point, and I've got down here, my child has had enough. I've written these really as notes so that I can remind myself. At this point, we often come across the point where a child goes, that's it, I'm done, I've had enough, I don't want to do it anymore. You might find them pushing back a bit against what you're trying to put in front of them. And part of that is that they're really near the exam, and they might be starting to panic, they might be starting to worry. But part of that is also about motivation. So we're getting to the end of this process. Everybody is tired, parents and students. Everyone is tired. Everybody wants it to be done. Your child might be at the point where they are consistently doing really well. They might be at that point where they're actually getting quite varied results. I'll talk about that on the next slide, but you really need to keep that motivation. Now, as a parent, you know what motivates your child, and you also know what your kind of personal values are around it. But I've used everything from sticker charts to video gaming time to anything that really works. So it might be complete this paper and then we will spend 30 minutes doing baking. Actually, one of my students is doing that right now. So anything that can give you that last little push in order to get to that exam. But also extrinsic motivation. So looking at the school, looking at, making sure that they've got, if they wanted to go to that school for a while, they're reminded of that. But make sure that's balanced. Not that the only result is the school. The result is putting yourself through the paper and what kind of work you put in. It's not just about that school. So use other things of motivation as well. Now is the ideal time to work on trouble areas. So that might be an individual topic. That might be if you're doing something like math, verbal, nonverbal, and English, you might choose to focus, say, on nonverbal. It might be that it's a smaller thing within that. So it might be something like nets and cubes within nonverbal. And you might want to go back, and if your child is still struggling with it, you might want to go back and to look at doing different ways of working through the question. So different techniques, different styles of question. I'm a really big fan of using lots of different books at this stage and lots of different resources, because ultimately something like Future Stories, for example, we don't know what this question style might look like, but even in somewhere like GL, they have the propensity, the likelihood that they might throw an unusual style of question. They've done a couple for verbal reasoning recently. So do make sure that they've seen lots and lots of different ways of asking those questions under the topic area that they're looking at. That trouble area is what I'd call it. Okay. Hopefully, I think everybody should be able to still hear me. I know that I'm abroad, so I am looking at the internet, and it should be fairly okay. All right. Other things, don't just focus on exam papers. Okay. If you do an exam paper over and over again, make sure that you are going through them, that you really are looking at the results, that you really are looking at the trends, that you are spending time with your child to make sure that they are understanding where they went wrong. Not just, oh yeah, I get that. Because it's really easy to say at this point, oh yeah, I get that, it's fine. Actually, make sure that they fully understand it. But again, make sure you are doing full papers, because if your child hasn't done full papers yet, they maybe haven't done any mocks, or they haven't done any practice papers at home, they need to get used to the timing. So again, balance those full papers. You might choose to do a full paper every other day. You might choose to spend the other day looking at where they went wrong on that paper, looking at individual exercises, spending time on the topics. But at the same time, you want to be doing those papers because you want to make sure that the timings are correct. And then start to help your child to get mentally used to the idea of going to the exam. It's something that I work on with students who do my exam technique classes. We talk about the idea of seeing in your mind's eye, visualizing, going to the exam. And make sure that they know exactly how they're getting there. They know what time they're going. If you know that you're in the morning or the afternoon, make sure that they're aware of that as well. Because our imaginations are quite different to what actually happens. So you don't want them to come as a shock when on the day of the exam you say to them, right, we've got to be there by 9 and you're coming in the car with dad. And actually they've been expecting an entirely different setup. They've been expecting to walk with the other parent, or they'd expect it to be in the afternoon. So make sure that they are aware of those things, because again, it can cause anxiety, it can cause nervousness around students, to make sure that they really know what's happening. They want to know exactly what's going to happen. All right. The last thing that I wanted to put down was about prioritizing exams. And every time I say this, and I say this every year, there's always someone who reaches out to me and goes, I don't know what to do. Now, you may well have applied for lots and lots of exams. You may well have thought, I'll sit multiple 11 pluses or multiple 11 pluses and then a load of independents. You will know how your child will deal with multiple exams. And there will be a point where if they keep going, they are going to burn out or they're going to struggle. Now, your child might love exams, and I quite like them. And so for me, taking multiple exams would be fine if I knew they were coming up. If I knew they were coming up, that's the thing. If I was fully aware of all those dates, then I'd probably be okay. But if your child is somebody who panics a lot, or indeed you've got a clash between two exams and it's going to be really hard to make both of them, prioritize. So sit down and work out what the priorities are. It might be that they do the majority of the ones you've signed them up for, but maybe one of the ones you signed them up to as a practice, they don't end up doing because it's going to cause them additional stress, and it's going to mean that the result the next day, for example, might get interrupted. So do consider prioritizing. And if that is changing your plans, make sure your child knows. Because if they've got their heart on one school, and that's the school that you decide, well, we're not that interested in that, then they're going to be very disappointed. So make sure that it's a decision that you take with them, or it's a decision that you tell them that you have made. It might be that you apply to schools that now you can no longer attend. So you might have taken them for a visit, they might have really enjoyed it, and then you might find that actually it's too far to travel. Then consider, is it worth taking that exam? Is it a good practice? If it is, then that might be something to do. But if it's not, and it's going to cause additional stress, it's going to mean that your child is doing exams rather than preparing, that might be something to consider. That's why I always say to prioritize and to consider what you're prioritizing. What I'm not saying is prioritize the result, because we would rather wait until you have all the offers on the table, and then you can make the right decision on that. The only reason that you might take a school out of the running is if it impacts your child in some way. So consider those things. So those are all of our 1 month left bits. And in particular, when we're talking about kind of troubling areas, we're talking about exam places, we're also looking at exam technique. And for those of you that are year 5, your child is taking these exams, you will be able to tell. If you've been doing mock exams or practice exams, you may be seeing this fluctuation. And this fluctuation is often what I call down to confidence and down to technique. It's not that your child doesn't know the answer. It's often that they do, but they might be rushing it, or they might be panicking. Very, very often when I do mock exams with students, I look at the first 10 questions immediately. And that tells me the student that's rushed the most or panicked the most, because they've made a whole load of mistakes in those first 10 questions. Look at where your child is making mistakes in the paper. If they're making them at the start, make sure that they've got a relevant checking routine. So they know these are the questions I need to go straight back to. They might make them at the end as well. The end is more unusual because they're difficult, and it might just be that they're rushing, or it might be because they're difficult. If they're making them at the start, it's usually because they're rushing, because the starter questions are usually a bit easier, and sometimes students rush because the timing element. So exam technique can be a really big thing, because if we're looking at 50 questions and they're getting, even 4 wrong in the first 10 questions, that 4 can be an 8% difference. So it really starts to add once you know about how to take the exam, how to work on the technique. And it's not just looking at individual topic areas, it's also looking at things like Where are they going wrong in the paper? Make sure they're aware of the timings. Make sure they've practiced these exams to time. If you send them in without having gone through a timed paper, that's like trying to send someone to their driving test without them knowing what could come up. So do think about that. Timing is really important, and don't let it be the first time that they're doing it and the real thing. Yes, these exams can be really quite long to run at home, but you can split them up. You can do an English paper one day, math the next, verbal, then non-verbal. You can do it that way. If you've got combined papers, try and get to the timings and the practice of doing them as near as you can. Because timing, again, is where I see a lot of mistakes. If someone's run out of time, that's it. If they don't know what to do if they've run out of time, then they've lost those marks. If it's a multiple choice, we'd always say just guess it. Just put every answer as C. Because at least you've got a chance at that point. You've got a 1 in 5 at that point. So do make sure that they're aware of the timings. Make sure that they know when do they need to be moving on. When do they need to be talking? When do they need to be thinking about moving to, if they've got a creative writing piece, the creative writing. Third one in exam techniques, all about confidence. Building it. Confidence isn't something that just appears one day. It's something that has to be built. So when I work with students, I work with them on building their confidence, on making sure that they've got something that allows them to see that they are well prepared and that they have worked for this and they know what they're doing. Because when you ask a student what's their biggest worry about 11 plus, they'll often say, I'm worried that I won't score well, or I'm worried that I won't finish the paper, I'm worried that I will, and it's always those types of things that are confidence-based. And what we want to do is we want to help a student to believe in themselves. So that might mean at home sitting there and talking about the concerns that they've got. That might mean saying to them, when I work with students, I come up with a routine for them, a confidence routine, something to say to themselves that tells them that they know what they're doing, they've prepared, they're doing well. Because the more we say it, the more our brain gets used to it. I've put down the what ifs, and the what ifs is something where parents can really, really help students here. What ifs are all the little questions that a child often has, and it goes round in their brain and they sometimes don't ever ask you. So what if there's a fire alarm? What if I see someone I know from school? What if we don't make it there on time? Sometimes students, not all of them, now you know your child better than I do. Right? Some children really sit there and worry about those what ifs. And what we want to do is give them a way to get round it. What if someone turns up from my school who I'm not expecting, and maybe they don't know I'm doing the 11 plus? Come up with something that they can do. Are they going to go up to them and say hello? Are they going to ignore them? What are they going to do? Once they've got a plan of action, it's a lot easier. You don't have that niggle, you don't have that worry going around in your brain. What if there is a traffic accident? That's easy. We will ring the school, we'll explain that we're late, but we won't be really late because we're going to leave however long early. Where are you going to be during the exam? Provide them with the answer. Don't let them worry about anything other than doing the exam. So clear those what ifs up. Make sure that they are cleared up. Exam technique, a large amount of it comes down to speed and accuracy. And that differs from English to math. It really depends. And there are lots of individual techniques that we use to speed up, but you want to look at both speed and accuracy. If you notice that your child is finishing early, but they're making simple mistakes, they've increased their speed and decreased their accuracy. And what you need to do is you need to go and work on checking. So with those in mind, I do have to say I am running exam technique masterclasses. The first one is actually running tomorrow. One is in math, one is in English, and those are the types of things that we cover in a child-friendly way. I'm not going to spend very long. Just drop me a message or drop me a message in the chat if it's something that's of interest. Recapping and revising. Now, sometimes, and this comes up occasionally for me, sometimes a parent will say to me, I don't need to revise because my child's been doing exams and they've been doing lots of practice papers, and those practice papers have got all of the different topics. Except it's not guaranteed that they have, because exam papers, written exam papers, past papers, wherever, they are written to include most, but not all topics. So just because your child has done a lot of practice papers, it does not mean that they have covered all the areas of topics. So do make sure that they know it. And that might be very easily something I do with my students. We start with 10 questions the moment we start any lesson. And what I do is I open up the syllabus and I just pick something, really something random. So I might say, right, okay, time. Tell me how many days are there in July? Just a quick fire question, because it's not something they often get asked in a paper. In fact, it might be masked by the fact that they might get those questions wrong, but you might think it's because they're struggling to read it or because they're struggling to break it down. All I do is just pick those topics. Okay? If I started a film at 5:10 and it finished at 6:45, how long has it taken? All I do is just give them those little and often questions, quick fire, and I tick them off on the syllabus. And that means I haven't missed anything out. Papers are great. Papers help with timing. Papers help with confidence. Papers help with, understanding how to break the questions down, but they do not cover everything. And so you cannot rely, just because they've taken all the papers in the world, that they have covered everything on that syllabus, that they have covered everything that you have been over. And you want to make sure that when they go into the exam, you can say to them, look, we've covered everything. And I know we've covered everything because I've been marking it down. It makes us feel a lot better, feel a lot more sure of ourselves when we go over those things. And you'll know that there are certain areas that they might need to spend more time on. And then there are certain areas where they don't need to spend as much time. And that's where what I do is I use a traffic light system. I say to them, is it green? Is it yellow? Is it red? And red ones, we do a lot more than we do green. But we will still do the green ones because I won't have them go into an exam not having covered in a while just the easy stuff. Again, just so that people are aware. So we ran a 11 plus comprehension course, my company, The Education Hotel. We were asked to run it again. So we are running it again next week. We're also running a non-verbal reasoning and a verbal reasoning course. So just so that you are aware, so that you can make that decision if need be. Now let's move on to 1 week return. So 1 week to go. Many of you will go back to school. Many children will go back to school, not you, literally. But many of your children will go back to school. And sometimes we get asked, should I send my child back to school? And ultimately, I would say routine is important at this point. They've spent all of the holidays preparing. And sometimes we can feel like, just that last little bit. But in reality, how much more are you going to do in that last week? It's not like you're going to make a massive impact, but you are still going to keep the routine of 11 plus. And that might mean that you do spellings. That might mean that you do grammar. That might mean that you do small little pieces of work around school. But I tend to try and keep the same routine. So one thing that I always remember actually is talking to Sheena, who's another admin, Sheena Aja, here in the group, the author of Cadwallader Quests. And she always said that she did with her children, she did non-verbal reasoning at the start of the day. And that type of routine is really useful because it allows you to just go, right, that's what we're doing this morning. Or we're going to do 10 spelling words, if spelling is the thing that you want to focus on. Or we're going to do a sheet of math, Schofield and Sims kind of style. So keeping that routine, little and often. Returning to school also can mean returning to parents whose children are also taking the 11 plus. And that can mean that your stress levels as a parent can increase because at the school gate, everybody is talking. Everybody is saying, we're going for this place, we're doing this, this is the preparation we've done over school. if you are stressed as a parent, your child should not know, because it's not their job to think about your stress. It's their job to focus on the exam. So if you are worried, then by all means, tell us on the group. By all means, talk to others about it, but don't let your child know. Because if your child overhears, even just overhears you in the playground saying, oh yeah, we are really worried about how Billy will do in the exam, then they immediately take that to heart. They think, oh, my mum doesn't believe that I can do it. And that in itself can cause worry. So if you have got stress, if you are worried about how you might get there on the day, or you're worried about knowing what happens after the exam, then come to somebody else. Don't go to your child. And then the one underneath, I would say as well, is something that happens a lot at the school gates, which is comparison. Oh, my child has been scoring 84% consistently. How has yours been doing? Don't get involved with it, because everybody will try and compare. And again, if it's something your child overhears, then they've overheard you saying to somebody else, oh, we're not achieving that. Or they've heard you saying to somebody else, we are achieving that. But ultimately, it's not something we need to be doing, is publicly comparing children. You wouldn't publicly compare anyone else. So try not to do it. I know it can be really, it feels like everyone's kind of doing it. So it can be really, it feels like you're the odd one out if you don't. But I would just abstain from it, because it's going to increase your stress levels. It's going to increase your child's stress levels. It's also not going to help, because knowing that somebody else's child has been scoring better than yours, that doesn't do anything. So consider what's right for you. And most of the time, public comparison is not. Maintain that motivation. Now is the time to start to think about, if you're going to offer rewards about taking the exam, that might be this time to start thinking about it. If you are trying to get them just through that last little bit, and often combined with school, children get really tired on this 1 week. They return to school, and then they start to feel a bit, oh. So you need to just make sure that they are motivated, make sure that they are continuing to achieve as highly as they can, and be prepared there will be a dip. It's fine. It happens. It happens because they get tired and distracted. They go back to school. But it doesn't mean that you should stop going to school, because that's going to be even more unusual for them. And usually they start to worry, what happens if I miss school? What am I going to miss? Why am I doing this? Puts a lot of pressure on. So maintain that motivation, but start to think about little ways that you can help them out. Deal with any worries that your child has. So again, sit down, have that conversation, make sure that they know what's happening on the day, make sure that they know kind of how to deal with everything that they might be worried about. And if you ask them, you might find that there's some unusual things you've not thought about that they're concerned around. They might be concerned about, what if I don't get the score that I need for 11 plus? What's going to happen then? And you can talk to them about the schools that you think are a good fit. And I always say multiple schools are a good fit. I would never say there is this one, because that puts a lot of pressure on. I would talk about multiple schools, of which the ones you are taking the exams for might be some of them. Again, a reminder of how far you've all come. Sometimes parents need that reminder, because sometimes it can feel like a big slog, big old slog getting to these exams. Just remind yourself how far you've both come, because you're working as a team. So your child's increased their knowledge, they've increased their confidence, they are more confident, more able around what they can do. And you've worked with them to achieve that. So do remind both yourselves. This is something that actually in preparation for today, I re-watched a couple of videos that I did a while ago, a couple of talks that I've done. I've updated the talk since then, but one of the things that, interestingly, I know that I was discussing is how sometimes we get fixated. and it's really good with today being A-level results day. And we sometimes get fixated with the idea that you take the 11 plus, then you do your GCSEs, then you do your A-levels, then you do your universities, and this is the only route. So grammar schools offer this one route and there is nothing else. But that's not true. There are plenty of schools that offer great GCSE results, offer great university destinations. And there are many places and many opportunities that don't involve university nowadays. So again, even if for you have thought we're really interested, we really want to go to this one school, do make sure you do have a plan B, because again, it's about making sure that your child knows that yes, they are taking these exams, and yes, they may really want to go to this school, but there is a plan B. You do know what else is happening. It might be that they're taking exams later on, as I said. I'm telling them about those independent entrance exams that they're doing later on is one of those things. And then the last thing is something that I actually do with quite a lot of my parents. I get parents into some of the sessions that I work with students one-to-one. And I talk about this with students when I do things like exam masterclasses. I talk about what stress feels like to me. And I talk about what happens when I'm stressed. And I help students to understand what that's like, because often they don't think adults get stressed at all. They think it's just something that's happening with them. And sometimes that makes them reluctant to talk to you about it. I also talk about times that I have not done exactly what I wanted to, and what I would call failure, but I don't like that word, so I won't say it. It's the F word. It's not something I like to say in front of students. Times that I've maybe not got where I wanted to go, and what I've done because of it. I don't sit down and I don't say, this is what you're going to do if you do not get the school of your choice for grammar schools. I just have a conversation with them. I have a conversation with them about what's happened previously for me. I have a conversation about the idea of hard work and why hard work will always help us out. And sometimes I'll use examples of footballers, for example, or celebrities, or people I find really admirable in careers, Richard Branson, for example. And I will say, okay, well, here's somebody who didn't score very well in their exams. They've got a completely different idea and a completely different path to me, but I really, really admire them because of these things, because of the fact that they have taken this adversity, they've worked with it, they've bounced back. And sometimes just having that little conversation puts just in the back of a child's mind that, okay, it is something I'm going to put my absolute best into, this exam, but it's also something where I know that, actually, if it doesn't work for me, then there is always other options. And I like to emphasize that. So I want to go back. I think I talked about this when it was 4 months to go. We talked about this triangle: foundations, specification, key skills, short assessments, practice papers, mock exams, real thing. But what we're doing is we're right at the top now. Right, almost there. And we still need to consider all the things on the right. We still need to consider making that revision fun. We still need to consider being healthy body, healthy mind. We still need to consider things like planned breaks. Just because it's getting nearer does not mean we speed up. I liken it, and indeed, I believe actually my tutor, when I first of all looked at the 11 plus, likened it to a hurdles race. And what they said, and it stuck with me, and then this shows kind of the importance of sitting down and talking with your child around this, because I still remember this to this day. He said that doing the 11 plus is like running a hurdles race. And it's not that when the exam starts, you start the race. In fact, most of the hurdles you've gone over, because you've been running this race since you started preparing. You've learned all the material. You have overcome some of the worries that you have about exams. You have you've started to work out the timings, the exam technique. And actually, instead of thinking about it as a big long hurdles race, we're now at the sprint at the end. We've done all of those hurdles. And now it's that last little sprint. And that has stuck with me. That sticks with me every time I think about an exam. Because in reality, that last little piece, that exam bit, all that is just the last little sprint. The rest of it is all about hurdles. We've overcome those hurdles. We've done that race. We are now on that final little piece. And that final little piece is just that last little sprint. And that's why we talk a lot about motivation, about confidence, because that is what helps us to get over the line. They've learned all the material. At this point, they're mostly there. It's just about getting them through that last sprint. And sometimes sprinting is a different skill to hurdles. So you might be really good at getting over the hurdles, but you have to learn some extra little things to do the last sprint. And that might mean timings. That might mean getting a handle on your nerves, anxieties, worries. Those are different to overcoming the hurdles. You have mostly run that race. We're now focusing on that last little bit. And interestingly, that is what I remember. I very, very clearly remember doing that when I was doing 11 Plus, and that was a long time ago. So it's interesting what kind of stories we tell and how it works. So do consider. Then we've got the day before. The day before the exam is always a worry for parents. People always talk to me about this. What if I fail? There's the question that often students talk about. Now, hopefully you've talked about how it's one of many schools, you've talked about the plan B, and actually your child isn't asking this question. But if they are, then explain to them what will happen. Because actually it's not as scary as it seems. Well, if you don't get the scores and you don't get into the school that you're taking the exams for, then this is what happens with the other schools. And that's something that I would always say, be honest around, because ultimately it stops that unknown. It stops that worry. Actually, the world's not going to fall apart because you didn't achieve the score that you needed to for the schools. It really doesn't. And actually, there's plenty of people out there that will go to a different school and will still score really amazingly in, say, GCSEs and A-levels and university. And there are those that will go to other schools and achieve completely different careers and will shine in drama and sport and different things. So again, making sure that if they are asking that question, you have that answer. Day before, I really think about emphasizing the work that you've put in. Yes, they're taking an exam. And yes, we want them to do their absolute best in the exam. But that's what we want them focusing on, doing their best in the exam, not scoring whatever in this exam. And it's hard because often we've been talking about that kind of language when we're talking mock exams. We're talking about scores. We're talking about marks. Now we want to shift. We want to shift towards the work. And if you are thinking about rewards, again, it's a very dependent parental choice. But if you are, I would recommend that reward being at the end of the paper, not when the results come out, because you want to reward the fact that they have gone through that exam. So some people do a lovely meal. Some people might do a game. Some people might do certain things for it. It's entirely up to you what you choose to do. Some people don't choose to make a big deal out of it. But, emphasize that work, the work that they've put in, the fact that they have tried their hardest, they've gone through these exams, and isn't it amazing that they have spent all this time and this energy and they've really improved their skills. As a parent, make sure you're organized. Don't have any last minute running around in the middle of the morning trying to find pencils or pencil cases. I would get that sorted before the day before. Because again, we don't want parental stress to transfer onto a child. And if you're running around are going, oh, I can't find all the pencils, and where's a clear pencil case? All of that makes your child worry. Purely sit them down and go, right, we've got this, and this, and this, ready to go. And they can say, oh, I don't want that in my pencil case, or I do want that in my pencil case. That's fine, as long as it's within the rules. So make sure that as a parent you are organized, you know what you're doing. There's petrol in the car if you're going by car. You've got an idea if there's any train strikes, if you're going by train. Make sure that you really know what's going to happen on the day. And that, again, just helps your child to relax because they know you've got it in hand. And that's much nicer than watching you run around and worrying about what might happen. And then the last thing I would recommend is a calming evening. Now, that looks different for every family, but that for me means kind of early bed, bath, bit of TV, usually something funny, and kind of calm. Because ultimately, sitting there staring over a book, how much more are you going to do? You're not going to move the dial. You may move the dial in the last month, definitely. I believe that. I think you move the dial in the last week, especially in terms of confidence and technique. The day before, I think you can move the dial. Because anything that you do is likely to be forgotten when they walk in anyway. So instead of trying to cram their brain full of all of the vocab, I would have a calming evening. I would put the work away. That's it. Done. Not going back to it. And then in the morning, again, nice calm morning, and make sure that everything is arranged, ready to go. So I think, yes, that is it. So thank you ever so much for listening. And again, thank you ever so much to Subba, who lets me come on and lets me talk to you. As I said, if you are watching this, whether you're watching it live or whether you are watching it on replay, if you've got questions, drop them for me in the chat, because I will be back. I will be able to answer them. I will be able to write to you and hopefully help you through those next little bits. But thank you ever so much. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, we're here to help. That's what the 11 Plus journey is all about. We are all about helping you to really kind of achieve, and helping your children to achieve as well. So thank you very much, and I will let you get on with your evening.